The first time Arthur Langley told me I was not allowed to leave his house, he was standing between me and the front door with one hand wrapped around a silver-topped cane and the other pressed against an alarm panel that could lock every gate on the property. Until that moment, I had spent 6 hours pretending to be engaged to his granddaughter, Madeline, and I had done the job well enough to convince almost everyone at the table. I had remembered the story of our imaginary first date, kept my hand lightly at her waist whenever her relatives watched us, and smiled while her mother inspected the vintage diamond ring Madeline had rented for the evening. The performance was supposed to end after dessert. I would return the suit, collect my fee, and become a stranger again before midnight. Then Arthur asked me to help him open an old bottle of wine. When I reached for the corkscrew, my sleeve moved back and revealed the burned initials on the inside of my wrist, RL. Arthur dropped his glass. The room went silent. He gripped my arm, stared at the mark, and whispered, "Who gave you that scar?" I told him I had carried it for as long as I could remember. He asked my father's name. I said Daniel Ross. Arthur looked at Madeline's father, then at the family attorney, and something like betrayal passed between all three men. I decided the assignment was over. Madeline followed me into the entry hall, apologizing while I reached for my coat. That was when her grandfather stepped in front of the door. "You cannot leave, Bao," he said. "Sir, whatever you think you recognize, I am not part of this family." "That is precisely what they wanted you to believe." Madeline moved beside me. "Grandpa, move away from the door." Arthur ignored her. His eyes remained fixed on the scar. 31 years ago, a baby disappeared from this house during a fire. His name was Robert Langley. Those initials were burned into his hospital bracelet before the flames reached the nursery. I was 35 years old, a construction estimator from Baltimore, and the only Robert I had ever known was a mechanic who lived 2 streets from my childhood home. Yet the old man looked at me as though my departure would repeat the worst loss of his life. "I am not your missing grandson," I said. Arthur's hand moved to the alarm. Heavy locks clicked throughout the entry hall. "Then you will remain until we prove it." Before I tell you how a one-night engagement became a fight over identity, inheritance, and the meaning of home, subscribe if you enjoy emotional stories where family secrets collide with unexpected love. And leave a comment telling me whether you would stay in a house after an old man claimed you had been stolen from it. Because the reason Arthur refused to let me leave changed every choice Madeline and I made afterward. 4 days earlier, I had been sitting alone in the lounge of a Baltimore hotel waiting for a client who had canceled without calling when Madeline Langley approached my table and asked whether I could look convincingly devoted to a woman I had never met. She wore a dark green dress beneath a camel coat, her auburn hair pinned loosely behind her head, and an expression that suggested she had spent the entire afternoon rejecting less dangerous solutions. "Convincingly devoted?" I repeated. "Is that a service category? The agency calls it private social representation. That sounds expensive." "It is." She placed a leather folder beside my coffee. I had joined the agency 11 months earlier after my construction consulting company lost its largest contract. My former partner had concealed cost overruns, blamed them on me, and disappeared before the lawsuits began. The agency assignments helped me pay legal bills while rebuilding my reputation. Most involved attending charity events or business dinners with clients who did not want to appear alone. I had never accepted a romantic role. "How long do you need a devoted stranger?" I asked. "One evening." "That is a brief relationship. It will appear to have lasted 9 months." "Efficient." She opened the folder. The assignment would begin at 5 the following Saturday and end at 11:30. I was to attend her grandfather's birthday dinner at Langley House, present myself as her fiancé, participate in family photographs, and support her during a private discussion about the future of the Langley Foundation. "Why does your foundation need a false engagement?" I asked. "It does not. My family does." Madeline explained that Arthur Langley had founded a national chain of rehabilitation hospitals and transferred much of his wealth into a charitable foundation. Madeline, 33, directed one of its community programs. She had proposed converting a vacant hospital property into long-term apartments and job training facilities for young adults leaving foster care. Her father, Charles, and uncle Gregory controlled most board votes and opposed the plan. "They say the project is too personal," she said. "Why?" "Because I spent part of my childhood in foster care." The answer surprised me. "You are Arthur Langley's granddaughter. I became his granddaughter when my mother married Charles. Before that, I was the daughter of a woman with addiction problems who disappeared for months at a time." "And your father uses that history against your proposal?" "He calls it emotional bias. He says I confuse compassion with governance." That sounds like something people say when they want compassion removed from a decision. A corner of her mouth lifted. You understand quickly. I estimate risks for a living. Then estimate this one. She turned to the payment page. The amount would cover 2 months of legal expenses and allow me to keep my last employee. Why does an engagement change the board? I asked. Grandpa believes I avoid permanence. My father encouraged that opinion because it makes my foster care proposal look like another temporary obsession. Last week, my grandmother asked whether there was someone serious in my life. I said there was someone important. You meant the project. She heard a man. My mother heard commitment. My father heard an opportunity to stop discussing my proposal unless I brought the fiancé to dinner. You could correct them. I tried. Grandpa said he was relieved I had finally chosen a stable future. Then he agreed to hear the proposal again Saturday night. So I'm evidence of stability. For approximately 6 hours. What happens afterward? We announced that the engagement ended privately. That might confirm their opinion. By then, Grandpa's vote will have transferred the property into an independent trust. She said it calmly, but her thumb moved repeatedly along the edge of the folder. Madeline did not like depending on anyone, especially a stranger she was paying to lie. What are the rules? I asked. Holding hands, an arm around my waist when appropriate. One photograph with the family, separate arrival and departure. No financial promises, no discussion of immediate wedding dates, and no kissing unless refusing would expose the arrangement. Who decides whether a kiss is necessary? We both do. Emotional expectations? None. You put that in writing? Page 6. I found the clause, neither party would interpret physical affection, personal disclosure, or protective behavior during the assignment as evidence of genuine attachment. You highlighted it, I said. Clarity prevents misunderstandings. Clarity in a contract, perhaps. Her eyes narrowed. Can you do the assignment? Why choose me? Your profile says you worked in residential construction before becoming an estimator. Langley House is being renovated, so you can discuss something my grandfather understands. Professional reason. She hesitated. The former client said you make people feel safe without making them feel managed. That sounds less professional. It is still relevant. And my photograph? She looked directly at me. You looked kind. The answer carried enough honesty to make both of us uncomfortable. I should have refused. Madeline's family had turned her personal life into evidence in a business dispute, and entering that conflict as a false fiancé invited complications no contract could control. Yet her project mattered. I had grown up in 4 foster homes before Daniel and Susan Ross adopted me at age 9. I knew what happened when children became adults without anyone to call after a crisis. One night, I said. Relief softened her face. One night. The next morning, we met in a cafe to construct our fictional relationship. We had supposedly met 9 months earlier while I reviewed renovation costs for a foundation property. Our first date took place at a restaurant overlooking Baltimore Harbor. I proposed 3 weeks ago on the steps of a historic courthouse after Madeline won a difficult zoning appeal. What did you say? She asked. During the imaginary proposal. My mother will demand exact words. What would convince you? It does not have to convince me. Your family will watch your face. She aligned 2 spoons beside her coffee cup. I would want him to respect my work. That sounds like a recommendation from a colleague. Then say he admires my independence. People admire independence until it prevents them from feeling necessary. Her fingers stopped moving. You are making assumptions. You hired me to make the relationship believable. Then invent something believable. I studied her across the table. I would tell you that you learned to stand alone because people who promised to stay often disappeared. I would say I do not want to rescue you or become proof that you are stable. I want to be present on the ordinary days when nobody is watching, when you are tired of being capable and need someone who will sit beside you without taking control. Then I would ask whether you would let me earn a place in that life. Madeline stared at me. That is too intimate. Is it inaccurate? You have known me less than 24 hours. You straighten objects when anxious, speak more formally when hurt, and describe the foundation project as ours twice even though you designed it alone. Most people think I am difficult to read. Most people may prefer the version of you that does not challenge them. She scattered the spoons. Use a shorter proposal. We selected a ring that afternoon from a vintage jeweler. Madeline rejected every large diamond because her family knew she hated jewelry designed to announce its price. She chose a modest old European cut stone in a platinum setting worn smooth beneath the band. When I placed it on her finger, she went still. Too tight? I asked. No. Then why are you staring at it? It looks real. That is the purpose. Objects should not create belief so easily. They give people permission to believe the story they already want. Her gaze lifted. What story does my family want? That someone chose you in a form they recognize. And what do you think? I think they should have noticed you already chose a meaningful life. Color rose beneath her cheeks. She removed the ring and handed it to the jeweler for sizing, but her fingers brushed mine before she let go. On the drive to Langley House Saturday afternoon, Madeline described every relative we would meet. Her mother, Caroline, avoided open conflict by smoothing over every argument until nobody remembered what caused it. Charles treated the family businesses like military operations and believed control was another word for responsibility. Gregory, Charles's younger brother, managed the real estate division. Arthur remained the true authority despite approaching 88. And your biological family? I asked. Madeline watched the highway. My mother died when I was 19. I never knew my biological father. I'm sorry. I spent 6 years moving between her apartment, relatives, and foster homes. Caroline was my caseworker before she married Charles. She eventually adopted me. That is how you became a Langley. Legally. Some relatives still treat it as temporary membership. Your grandfather? Never. He was the first person who said I belonged without adding a condition. Then why does he question your stability? Because he is afraid. After losing someone, Grandpa began believing permanence can be measured through property, marriage, and promises made publicly. Who did he lose? She hesitated. His first grandson. What happened? There was a fire in the nursery wing 31 years ago. The baby disappeared. Disappeared during a fire? The nurse said a man carried him outside. They found the nurse unconscious, but never found the child. No remains? None. The family believed he had been kidnapped. Did they search? For decades. Grandpa still hires private investigators whenever a lead appears. I touched the inside of my wrist through my sleeve. The burned initials had been there before Daniel and Susan adopted me. They said I arrived at the group home with no reliable records and refused to speak for months. A social worker believed the scar came from an abusive caretaker. What was the child's name I asked. Robert Langley. And his parents? My Uncle Gregory and his first wife, Elise. She died 2 years after the fire. Uncle Gregory remarried but never had another child. Could he be at dinner? He will be. Madeline looked at me. Why? No reason. She noticed the change in my voice but did not push. Instead, she placed her hand over mine on the center console. No family watched us. The gesture belonged only to the two of us. You can still leave, she said. You would lose the vote. That is my risk. The payment matters to my business. I can pay for preparation. I am staying. Why? I turned my hand beneath hers. Because I agreed. Because the project matters. And because I know what it is like to leave foster care with no place that expects you back. Her fingers tightened. You were in care? Until I was 9. The agency did not say. It was not relevant. It is to me. That sounds like an emotional expectation. Do not become smug. She kept holding my hand until the estate gates appeared. Langley House stood on a wooded hill outside Annapolis, a Georgian mansion built of pale stone with broad terraces overlooking the river. Construction equipment occupied one side of the property, where workers were restoring the original nursery wing. Caroline met us at the front steps. She embraced Madeline, admired the ring, and examined me with warm curiosity. Charles arrived moments later and asked about my business, income, debt, and long-term plans before anyone removed a coat. Father, Madeline said, Adrian is a guest, not an acquisition. Adrian Ross was my full name, though most people called me Ian. Charles preferred Adrian because it sounded formal enough to interrogate. Gregory greeted me with a polite handshake. He was 63, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and careful in the way powerful men often became careful around unfamiliar variables. When he heard my surname, he paused. Ross? Yes. Any relation to Daniel Ross? He was my adoptive father. Gregory's fingers tightened around mine. What did he do? Fire investigator, then building inspector. Where? Maryland and Virginia. Gregory released me. I may have met him. He never mentioned the Langley family. People often forget brief professional encounters. Arthur entered the drawing room with his cane and a nurse beside him. He ignored the engagement ring at first and studied my face instead. You look familiar, he said. I have one of those faces. No. His gaze sharpened. You have one particular face. Charles redirected him toward Madeline, who showed him the ring and accepted a kiss on the forehead. During cocktails, Arthur asked me questions about construction, foster care, and Daniel Ross. He listened more closely than anyone else. Did Daniel ever tell you where he found you? He asked. A group home outside Richmond. Before that? The records were incomplete, Gregory interrupted. Father, tonight is Madeline's celebration. It is my birthday. Both can be true. Arthur watched Gregory leave. Incomplete records are often complete enough for the person who removed the pages, he said. Dinner began with 14 relatives around a long mahogany table. Madeline and I performed smoothly. I remembered she preferred still water and replaced the sparkling glass before she asked. Caroline noticed. You pay attention, she said. Madeline makes important details easy to remember. Beneath the table, Madeline's fingers found mine. Arthur requested the proposal story. She repeated my words about ordinary days, but changed the ending. He said he knew I could stand alone, she told them, looking directly at me. He was asking whether I would choose to let someone stand beside me. Her voice softened enough that I nearly forgot the moment had never happened. That was not the script, I whispered. It sounded believable. Was it? Do not analyze it, Charles asked when we planned to marry. Madeline said the following spring. Gregory asked whether I had signed a prenuptial agreement. Arthur told him to stop discussing marriage like a hostile merger. The tension eased until dessert, when Madeline presented her foster transition proposal. She discussed construction budgets, partnerships, counseling services, educational programs, and long-term funding. Charles argued that the building could generate more revenue as a private treatment center. Gregory supported him. Arthur asked whether Madeline's personal history had influenced the plan. Yeah, she answered. It taught me exactly where the system fails. Emotion can weaken judgment, Charles said. Experience can sharpen it, I replied. Madeline's budget includes contingencies your commercial proposal does not. Her plan may earn less money, but it creates measurable public value. Charles's eyes narrowed. My daughter does not require a hired advocate. Madeline went still. Gregory watched us closely. What does that mean? Caroline asked. Charles placed a printed document on the table. The companion agency confirmed Mr. Ross accepted a private social assignment. The engagement collapsed in a single sentence. Madeline removed the ring and placed it beside her plate. I hired him, she said. Caroline covered her mouth. Arthur did not look surprised. Charles's anger was controlled and precise. You brought a paid stranger into this house to manipulate a foundation vote. I brought him because you turned my personal life into evidence against my work. You proved my concerns. No, I proved how far I believed I had to go before you would evaluate the proposal rather than the woman presenting it. Gregory looked at me. How much are you being paid? I named the amount. And did you know about the missing Langley child before accepting? No. The room changed. Madeline looked at me. Why would he know? Gregory stood. Because his father investigated the nursery fire. You said you may have met Daniel briefly. He was assigned to the case. Arthur's voice became quiet, and removed from it after 3 days. Charles stared at his brother. You never told us that. There was no reason. Arthur turned to me. Show me your left wrist. Every instinct told me to refuse. Instead, I rolled back my sleeve. The burned initials appeared beneath the chandelier. R.L. Arthur dropped his glass. He took my arm and examined the scar while Gregory went pale. Who gave you this? Arthur asked. I do not know. It matches the mark placed on Robert's hospital bracelet after his allergy testing. The bracelet melted during the fire. A scar cannot prove identity, Gregory said. No, Arthur replied. But Daniel Ross taking custody of an unidentified boy 3 months after being removed from the investigation may I stood. Daniel did not take custody until years later. What was the name of the group home? Arthur asked. St. Matthew's. Funded by a shell charity Gregory controlled. The table fell silent. Gregory's chair moved backward. Father is confused. I have spent 31 years becoming less confused. Arthur faced me. DNA can answer this. Until it does, you remain here. You cannot detain me. I can prevent you from leaving with family records and warn the police that a possible heir arrived under a false identity. I did not come for your inheritance. Then staying one night should not frighten you. Being locked inside a stranger's house should frighten anyone. Madeline rose beside me. Grandpa, move away from the door. Arthur's voice softened. If he leaves, Gregory will make certain we never see him again. That accusation requires evidence. The evidence is being restored in the nursery wing. He looked at me. Daniel hid something inside the walls before he was removed from the case. The construction crew found his initials yesterday. Gregory's expression changed before he could hide it. Arthur saw it too. The old man pressed the alarm panel and locked the estate gates. Nobody leaves until we open that wall, Bates. Madeline stood between Arthur and me. Ian chooses whether he stays. Her grandfather stared at her. He may be Robert. He is still a person, not property you recovered. The words cut through everyone's panic. She turned to me. The engagement is over. You owe this family nothing. I will call the police and have the gates opened. I looked toward Gregory. He was no longer arguing. He was calculating. Whatever waited in the wall frightened him more than my possible identity. I will stay, I said. Madeline's eyes searched mine. Because Grandpa pressured you? Because Daniel may have left evidence. If he knew who I was and hid the truth, I need to understand why. Arthur released the locks but ordered security to remain at the gates. The false engagement ended, yet Madeline remained beside me as the family crossed the dark courtyard toward the construction wing. The original nursery had been sealed after the fire and incorporated into a later addition. Workers recently uncovered a steel support behind damaged plaster. Scratched into it were the letters DR and 3 numbers. Measurements, I said. Daniel had taught me to record hidden compartments by marking distance from a permanent structural point. The numbers indicated 42 inches from the eastern window, 14 inches above the baseboard, and 6 inches deep. I removed a section of temporary paneling. Behind it sat a metal document case blackened by smoke. Gregory moved toward it. Madeline blocked him. Do not touch it. This is family property. It is evidence. Arthur called the family attorney, who arrived within 40 minutes with a police liaison and a portable DNA collection kit. The attorney opened the case in front of everyone. Inside were photographs, copies of fire reports, a damaged hospital bracelet, and a cassette recorder. The bracelet bore the name Robert James Langley. The melted metal tag had fused against fabric, leaving a crescent shape matching the scar on my wrist. A letter from Daniel lay on top. Mr. Arthur Langley, if you are reading this, I failed to return the child safely. The nursery fire was set to destroy records showing Gregory Langley diverted foundation money through St. Matthew's Children's Services. The night nurse, Elise Morton, discovered the transfers and threatened to tell you. Gregory confronted her in the nursery. During the argument, a heater overturned. Gregory took the financial records and left while flames spread. I arrived during the first response and found the baby outside in the arms of a maintenance worker named Samuel Reed. Samuel said a second man was searching for the child. Believing the threat remained active, I moved Robert to a secure hospital under temporary protection. Before I could report directly to you, Gregory persuaded my supervisor that I had contaminated evidence. Samuel disappeared. The temporary hospital transferred the boy into emergency care under the name Ian Reed. I have spent months trying to locate him. I hid these copies because official records are being altered. If I find Robert, I will return him only when I can prove the people controlling his home are no longer a danger. My hands shook. Daniel had not known where I was when he wrote the letter. The next documents explained the years between. He found me at St. Matthew's 6 years later after becoming a building inspector and recognizing the name on a renovation permit. By then, I remembered nothing and had been moved through several homes. Gregory still controlled the charity. Daniel and Susan began fostering me under the surname Ross. They intended to tell Arthur after gathering enough proof. Then Samuel Reed was found dead in an apparent robbery. Daniel became convinced someone was monitoring him. He chose adoption and silence over returning me to a powerful family he did not trust. The cassette contained the voice of the night nurse. She identified herself as Elise Langley, Gregory's first wife and my biological mother. Gregory told me the transfers were temporary, she said through static. When I discovered he used children's charity funds to cover gambling debts and private investments, I threatened to contact Arthur. He came to the nursery demanding the records. During the argument, he struck the cabinet. The heater fell. Smoke filled the room. I carried Robert toward the service door, but Gregory took him from me. I believed he was saving our son. Then I saw him hand Robert to Samuel and tell him to drive away. Gregory said the child would be safe if I remained silent. He later claimed Robert disappeared in the fire. If I die, my son was not taken by a stranger. His father sent him away. Caroline covered her mouth. Charles stared at his brother. Gregory's face emptied of denial. Elise was unstable, he said. She had been taking medication. Arthur struck his cane against the floor. She spent 2 years telling me you knew more than you admitted. You had her committed after the fire. She was dangerous to herself. You made her appear dangerous because she knew what you had done. Madeline moved closer to me, not touching until I reached for her hand. Why send me away? I asked Gregory. You were an infant. The fire was spreading. Samuel took you to safety. Then why alter the records? My father would have discovered the stolen money and removed me from the company. You let your family believe your child was dead to protect yourself. I believe Samuel would return you after the investigation cooled. He died. That was not my doing. And when Daniel found me, he refused to tell me where you lived. Gregory's voice sharpened with remembered anger. He demanded I confess publicly before he returned you. I threatened to charge him with kidnapping. So he kept me. He stole you from your blood family. He raised a frightened child while you protected your reputation. Arthur took the cassette from the attorney. Call the police. Gregory moved toward the door. Security blocked him. Charles asked the attorney to wait. If this becomes public, every foundation program will enter review. Madeline's proposal will be frozen. Employees who had nothing to do with Gregory's crimes will suffer. Arthur looked at his son with exhaustion. You have learned the family language well. When truth becomes expensive, remind everyone who depends on the lie. Charles flinched. Madeline released my hand and moved to the document case. The Foster transition property was purchased partly through St. Matthew's Holdings, she said. If the funds were stolen, the foundation may not own it legally. Exactly, Charles replied. A public investigation destroys your plan. Then the plan changes. You would sacrifice years of work? I would rebuild it before placing young people in housing funded by money stolen from children. Gregory looked at me. You can prevent this. If DNA confirms you are Robert, you inherit Elise's trust and a controlling share of the hospital company. Renounce any public claim, keep the records private, and I will support Madeline's project. I will also compensate you for every year you lost. The offer landed with surgical precision. My business would survive. Madeline's project would open. The family could preserve its foundation. All I had to do was accept that truth belonged only to the people wealthy enough to negotiate it. No, Madeline said before I could answer. Gregory smiled coldly. This is not your decision. Exactly. Stop using my project to purchase his silence. She faced me. Ian, whatever name the DNA gives you, you choose what happens to your history. I will not let my work become another condition attached to your belonging. That was the moment our false relationship changed into something I could not dismiss as performance. She was willing to lose the only project that had brought her home rather than make my freedom useful to her. Release everything, I told the attorney. Gregory lunged for the cassette. Charles caught his arm. In the struggle, Gregory knocked over a construction lamp. It struck the exposed floor and shattered. Sparks jumped toward a pile of old insulation. For 1 second, the smell of burning fabric carried me backward 31 years. Smoke, a woman screaming, the pressure of a bracelet against my wrist, and strong hands lifting me through a service door. I froze. Madeline pulled the fire extinguisher from the wall and smothered the sparks before they spread. Then she returned to me, took my face between her hands, and said, Look at me. You are here. This is not that room. Her voice cut through the memory. I breathed again. Police arrived before dawn. Gregory was detained on fraud, obstruction, and evidence tampering charges while investigators reopened Elise's confinement and Samuel Reed's death. DNA results came the following afternoon. I was Robert James Langley. Arthur read the report in his study with Madeline, Caroline, Charles, the attorney, and me present. He closed his eyes and cried without sound. Then he stood and approached me. Welcome home, he said. I stepped back. The words carried love, but they also carried 31 years of expectation I could not accept in one moment. My home was with Daniel and Susan Ross. Pain crossed his face. I understand. No, you understand a test result. I have not decided what this family means to me. Madeline moved beside me. Arthur nodded slowly. Then I will wait for whatever place you choose to give us. The gates remained open. I left Langley House that afternoon. Madeline walked with me to my car carrying the rented engagement ring inside its box. The agency payment has been transferred, she said. The assignment ended before dessert. You stayed. For reasons outside the contract. Exactly. She looked toward the house. I am sorry Grandpa locked the doors. He was afraid. Fear explains control. It does not excuse it. You sound experienced. My entire family uses protection to justify decisions made for other people. She handed me the ring. Return this to the jeweler. You chose it. For a lie. The lie brought us here. That does not make it romantic. I did not say it did. She held my gaze. Whatever happened between us inside that house cannot be trusted yet. You discovered your name, your mother, and the reason your parents kept you away. I lost my project and may lose the family position I spent years earning. Crisis makes strangers feel necessary. We were pretending to be necessary before the crisis, which makes the confusion worse. Her boundary hurt because it respected both of us. What do? I asked. We stop performing. You decide who you are without anyone claiming you. I rebuild the housing plan without using your inheritance. Then, when none of this is urgent, we see what remains. I close the ring box. No assumptions. No contract. No more pretending. Her eyes filled, but she nodded. No more pretending. The investigation lasted 9 months. Gregory pleaded guilty to fraud, obstruction, unlawful confinement-related charges, and conspiracy to falsify records. Investigators found no evidence that he ordered Samuel Reed's death, but they proved he used St. Matthew's to move stolen funds and hide records related to my placement. Elise had not died 2 years after the fire as the family believed. She lived under supervised care for another 7 years while Gregory blocked Arthur's visits by claiming medical restrictions. Her journals revealed that she never stopped searching for me. Arthur established a public archive in her name and transferred foundation control to an independent board. Charles resigned as chairman after admitting he had ignored inconsistencies to protect the institution. Caroline remained beside Madeline, though their marriage entered a long separation. The Foster Transition Building was returned to a state trust because stolen charitable funds had been used to acquire it. Madeline lost the property, the original grant, and her position on the Langley board. She formed an independent nonprofit and found a smaller abandoned vocational school near Baltimore. The building required more repairs and offered less prestige, but community partners supported the plan. I inherited Elise's trust and a share of the hospital company. I kept enough voting authority to require oversight and transferred most financial assets into restitution funds for children harmed by St. Matthew's. I retained the name Ian Ross professionally and added Robert as a middle name. Ian Robert Ross honored the parents who raised me without erasing the child Arthur had searched for. Daniel's final letter helped me decide. Son, if the truth reaches you after I am gone, know that I did not keep you because I believed blood did not matter. I kept you because Gregory treated blood as ownership. Arthur may love you. Elise certainly did. Their love deserves room in your life if you choose it. But no name, fortune, or grieving family has the right to demand that you become the child they remember. You are the man you built from every person who stayed. I visited Daniel and Susan's graves and read the letter aloud. Madeline did not come. She understood the moment belonged to me. Instead, she sent one message. You do not have to reduce one family to make room for another. We spoke only during legal meetings for 6 months. Every conversation remained polite, brief, and carefully professional. I missed her more than I expected. I missed the way she aligned pens before difficult discussions, the quiet humor she revealed when nobody was watching, and the uncompromising way she protected my right to choose, even when that choice cost her project. I told myself distance proved we were not confusing trauma with affection. In reality, it showed how much of my daily life had begun making space for her before I admitted it. One cold morning in February, Madeline entered my office carrying 2 coffees and rolled renovation plans. The school lease was approved, she said. Congratulations. Construction begins in April. You earned it. We need an estimator. Open bidding? Required. Then why are you here before the notice? She placed my coffee beside the laptop. 1 sugar, no cream. Because every important thing has happened for 6 months, and you remain the first person I want to tell. My chest tightened. That could be gratitude. I am grateful to the state attorney. I do not rehearse conversations with him while driving. Habit, then. Our engagement lasted less than a day. Intense habits form quickly. Ian. I set down the plans. I missed you too. Her shoulders lowered slightly. Then ask me to dinner. You came here to order me to invite you? I am practicing direct communication. 7 tonight? You remembered my schedule? You taught me preparation. Our first real date took place at a small restaurant overlooking Baltimore Harbor. Madeline wore a red sweater rather than the formal clothes she chose around her family. She left her phone in her bag. We spoke about the lives we had built away from Langley House. She told me she created the transition program because at 18 she left foster care with a scholarship, but no adult she trusted enough to call when her car failed. Caroline entered her life later through the adoption. But Madeline never forgot how freedom could feel exactly like abandonment. I told her I became an estimator because numbers gave uncertainty boundaries. Was the proposal speech real? She asked after dessert. Which part? Wanting the ordinary days when nobody is watching. I had known you one day. That is not an answer. It was real enough that I almost refused the assignment. Why? Because I could imagine them. She lowered her eyes. So could I. We walked beside the harbor afterward. Winter lights reflected across the water. Madeline stopped beneath an old iron bridge. The contract permitted one kiss if necessary. The contract ended months ago. I know. Then no kiss is necessary. Is that a refusal? I touched her cheek. It is why it would matter. I waited until she nodded. The kiss began carefully, without an audience, locked gates, or a family mystery to justify our closeness. Then her hands closed around my coat, and every stage touch at Langley House became obviously false beside the real thing. When we separated, she rested her forehead against mine. That felt new, she whispered. Good. We dated for 18 months. Madeline opened the transition center in the restored vocational school. My company won the cost management contract through competitive bidding, then nearly lost it after I refused to approve replacing the original workshop windows. She argued that energy efficiency mattered more than historical glass. We compromised with restored frames and interior panels. Both of us claimed victory. Arthur visited the center every month. He never called me Robert unless I invited him to tell a childhood story connected to the name. Most days, he called me Ian. He apologized for locking the estate doors. I thought losing you once gave me the right to prevent it again, he said. Fear does not create rights. I know that now. Charles entered counseling and rebuilt his relationship with Madeline without controlling a board vote. Caroline remained separated from him for a year before choosing whether their marriage could continue on different terms. Gregory wrote from prison. I did not answer until I was ready. When I finally visited, he looked smaller than the man who had dominated the nursery wing. I believed I would bring you back after I fixed the money, he said. You turned a child into collateral. Yes, so do you regret losing me or being exposed? He took a long time to answer. Both. I wish the better answer were entirely true. His honesty did not create forgiveness, but it ended another performance. Healing came through repeated choices, not one dramatic apology. On Arthur's 90th birthday, the family gathered at Langley House again. The gates remained open. The nursery wing had become an archive devoted to Elise, Daniel, Susan, and children whose identities had been altered by institutions claiming to protect them. The metal case sat beneath glass beside the burned hospital bracelet. Madeline met me in the entry hall wearing a dark blue dress and carrying the vintage ring from our false engagement on a chain around her neck. You kept it, I said. You returned it to the jeweler. Grandpa bought it afterward. Why? He said every family archive needs evidence of the mistake that opened the truth. That sounds expensive. He has guilt and money. It is a dangerous combination. After dinner, Arthur asked everyone to join him in the restored nursery. He stood beside the old alarm panel removed from the entry hall. The last time Ian came here, he said, I locked the doors because I believed love gave me the right to stop him from leaving. Madeline taught me that belonging cannot be created through confinement. Tonight, every gate remains open. He handed me the panel's brass key. You may keep this as evidence that old men can learn slowly. I accepted it. Then Madeline touched my arm. Walk with me? She led me to the vocational workshop built inside the former carriage house. Lanterns glowed between the ceiling beams. On the workbench sat a small wooden box made from oak salvaged from the nursery wall. You planned something, I said. Possibly. Without a contract? Growth. She opened the box. Inside was the vintage diamond from our fake engagement reset in a simple gold band. The engraving read, Chosen with every door open. My heartbeat changed. Madeline, the first time I wore this stone, it was meant to fool my family into believing I had built a stable life. Then Grandpa refused to let you leave because he thought love meant possession. She took my hand. For a long time, I worried our feelings existed only because the night became dangerous. Then the danger ended. The property disappeared. The inheritance settled. We built separate lives, And I still chose every road that led back to you. Are you proposing? I am considering it. Then I object. Her expression fell until I removed another wooden box from my jacket. Mine was made from walnut recovered from the vocational school. Arthur told you, she said. Arthur believes secrets should now survive no longer than 48 hours. I opened the box. Inside was a ring set with a small emerald that had belonged to Susan Ross. The first time I entered Langley House, I was paid to appear worthy of you. Then your grandfather claimed I belonged to him before either of us knew who I was. I lowered myself onto one knee. Finding Robert gave me a past. Keeping Ian honored the people who gave me a life. Loving you came afterward when you opened every door and let me decide whether to stay. I love the woman who would rather rebuild an entire project than purchase it with another person's silence. I love the way you challenge bad budgets, organize pens when nervous, and make people feel supported without taking away their choices. Madeline Langley, will you marry me without performance, leverage, locked gates, or any need to prove either of us belongs? Tears moved down her face. She knelt in front of me. Stand up. This is traditional. Our first engagement followed enough traditions. I stood. She held my face between her hands. Before I answer, promise me something. Anything honest. When fear makes you want to leave before anyone can reject you, speak. I promise. When I turn independence into distance, tell me. I promise. And if Grandpa tries to lock us inside the reception, we keep the brass key. She laughed through tears. Then yes. I placed Susan's emerald on her finger. She slipped the vintage diamond ring onto a chain beside the first one. This stays too, she said. Why? One ring represented the role, the other represents the choice. Applause erupted from outside the workshop. Arthur, Caroline, Charles, several center residents, and my employees had gathered behind the open doors. Madeline closed her eyes. You promised privacy. Arthur raised his cane. I promised not to lock the doors. We married the following spring in the courtyard of the transition center. Young adults who had lived there during its opening year attended alongside the Langley family and the people who had worked with Daniel and Susan. Photographs of Elise and my adoptive parents stood beside each other near the ceremony. Arthur carried the brass gate key. Caroline carried the burned bracelet inside a glass box. Charles attended without asking to give Madeline away. She walked toward me alone because, as she explained, she was not being transferred from one family authority to another. She was making a choice. During our vows, I promised never to confuse leaving with freedom or silence with protection. Madeline promised never to confuse independence with isolation. We both promised that any children we raised would know every part of their family story at an age they could understand, without growing up sensing that doors had been locked around them. Years later, the original alarm panel hangs in the center's public archive beside the fake engagement contract. Madeline crossed out the clause forbidding emotional assumptions and wrote beneath it, any relationship created behind locked doors must be reconsidered once every exit is available. Our daughter once asked why her grandfather refused to let her father leave the house. Arthur answered before either of us could. Because I was frightened and foolish. Did Daddy try to escape? She asked. Repeatedly, I said. Madeline told her I had stayed voluntarily. Arthur said he preferred the more dramatic version. The vintage diamond still hangs on a chain in our bedroom beside the brass key. Madeline's emerald carries no connection to the Langley inheritance. It belonged to Susan. The woman who chose to become my mother after blood and money had already made too many claims. That matters to us. I was born Robert James Langley. I became Ian Ross through the daily love of Daniel and Susan. One name explained how I entered the world. The other explained how I survived it. Madeline never asked me to choose between them. She called me Ian when speaking to the man she loved, and Robert only when helping Arthur preserve a memory. Home became possible because every person who mattered learned that identity cannot be recovered through force. Arthur searched for his grandson for 31 years, but finding me did not entitle him to keep me. Gregory was my biological father, but blood did not excuse what he stole. Daniel hid the truth, yet the life he built around me remained real. Madeline hired a stranger to fool her family. But after the lie ended, she became the first person inside Langley House willing to open the door and accept whichever direction I chose. That is why the night Arthur refused to let me leave no longer feels like the moment I came home. It was the moment everyone learned home could not be locked from the inside. I came home months later, freely, with my own key in my pocket and Madeline's hand in mine. Every ordinary evening, when she places her shoes beside the door and leaves her work files across our kitchen table, I remember the proposal speech we invented before either of us knew what the night would cost. I had told her I wanted the life where she no longer needed to perform strength. She had told her family I wanted to stand beside her while she chose. Both statements were true before we were ready to admit them. Yet truth alone was not enough. We had to let the crisis end, step apart, and return when no inheritance, locked gate, or old grief could decide for us. If this story reminded you that love cannot create belonging by force, subscribe and share it with someone who believes every real home must have an open door, and tell me in the comments. If a family claimed you after decades apart, would you stay to learn the truth or leave until they understood that being found is not the same as being owned?